Happy Monday. It is crazy that we are officially 1 week out from the Boston Marathon. Wanted to do a little course strategy. Definitely look on YouTube for more detailed course strategies that might have more information from people who have run it multiple years in a row, but figured it might be helpful to share some things that stood out to me last year as a first-time Boston Marathon runner. Okay, so as you can see here, the course starts in Hopkinton. Now, this is one of 8 towns that you will make your way through on your way to Boston over the course of the 26.2 miles. They will have this sign out near the start area, and there will be people cheering for you before you even cross the start line. That was one of my favorite parts of the whole race. Now, of course, Boston is notoriously hilly, and that starts from the very start. So when you start in Hopkinton, you can see here, before you even get to the mile 1 marker, you've already gone down a pretty sizable hill. And that first stretch of 3 or so miles is pretty much all net downhill. That's not to say that you don't go uphill at all, but it is a pretty heavy downhill. One thing that I learned whenever I was running that last year is I was being super cautious not to go out too fast, which I think is still good advice, but I kind of found that I wasn't even able to go out fast because it gets super narrow, especially when you start. So it's really hard to go around people. So it forces you to go out a little bit slower. From Hopkinton, you make your way into Ashland, where you'll get some more hills. You can see there's a decent sized one around mile 4. To be honest, none of these really stood out in my mind as anything crazy, but there are definitely like significant hills, both uphill and downhill, that you'll notice and people around you will notice. I forget exactly where it was, but it was definitely within the first 4 miles. There was this man near me, and he was like, oh, like I thought there was only one hill in the Boston Marathon. Like, absolutely not true. I think there's over 800 feet of gain in elevation and over 1,000 feet in loss. So while it is a net downhill marathon, there's still plenty of uphill climbs throughout the course. From Ashland, you'll make your way into Framingham, which is a pretty flat stretch of the course. This had a lot of great energy last year, so I think it's a good point in the race to kind of just like lock into your marathon pace miles and tick them off. There were tons of fans out there in Framingham. Around mile 10, you'll make your way into Natick. I remember there was this sign there that says like 16 miles to go. So that's one thing that you can look out for in Natick, and that's more rolling hills through Natick. And then right around the halfway point, you'll make your way into Wellesley. Your first indication of Wellesley will be hearing this scream tunnel, they call it, and it's the students at Wellesley College. And basically, it's all these girls out there screaming, holding these signs saying like, kiss me, and people are going over and kissing them or high-fiving them. They are on the right-hand side, so it might be a good idea to decide in advance if you are going to engage with the crowd there or if you're going to stay to the left and pass by them. Right around 15.5 miles, you'll get a very steep downhill as you're exiting Wellesley and heading into Newton. This will typically be a pretty fast mile for most people. And it's a good like warning sign of like, okay, let's ride this fast mile out, because once that fast mile is done, you head into the Newton Hills, which are 5 miles of rolling uphills. You've probably heard a lot about Heartbreak Hill, but in Newton, there are actually 4 primary hills. I believe they all have individual names as well, so you can look that up. But basically the first hill is, some people like to call it a warm-up hill, but it's basically like an overpass right at mile 16. And then shortly after mile 17, you make a right at the fire station. You can see it here in the background, but this is the start of the stretch of the 3 primary Newton Hills. So the first primary Newton Hill is right after you make this famous right turn at the fire station. This first hill is pretty steep. It is a little bit shorter than the others. I believe on average they're about half a mile long. I think this one is a little bit less, but it is, I believe, the steepest of the Newton Hills right after you make the turn at the fire station. So you'll go up that hill, you'll get a little bit of a downhill, and then some time in between the hills in Newton. You'll then make your way up another hill. I think it's about a mile later. They're not like back to back to back. You definitely have some time in between them. And that hill after is, I remember it being like less steep, but you don't really get a downhill afterwards. So that one I think seemed hard for me because of that. And then finally, right after you make it to mile 20, so you'll see that big sharp uphill between 20 and 21, that is Heartbreak Hill. I always remember it coming because you can see Heartbreak Hill Running Company on the right-hand side of the road, and like there will be tons of fans out there. It'd be kind of hard to miss the fact that it's Heartbreak Hill. And that one is fairly steep and also fairly long. And that's why it's called Heartbreak Hill, because it's like the biggest combination of long and steep. And also because it's the last of the 4 hills. It's not necessarily that much harder than the others. Some argue that it is, but it's more so because it's like the last big hill that you'll climb. And once you make it over Heartbreak Hill, you have about 5 miles left to go. You'll soon make it over to Boston College, which will get a nice burst of energy from the college students there. They are all super loud because they've been partying all day. So that's a really fun part of the course. And then from Boston College, you'll make I think it's a right-hand turn onto like around the reservoir, and then a turn, I believe it's left onto Beacon Street in Brookline. And you'll see here after mile 21, it's mostly rolling downhills, at least from 21 to 24. So that's another good place to kind of lock into your pace and try to even push a little bit more if you can, because you've really got the hard part done with. And then the last mile or so, you'll see some good landmarks. So you'll see the Citgo sign in the distance. Once you get to the Citgo sign, it's about a mile left of the race. You'll also go under the Mass Turnpike and see this Boston Strong. I think there's maybe like a slight uphill here, but it's nothing compared to what you'd already done in Newton. And then you'll be running down Commonwealth Avenue, ComAv as they say in Boston, for a little bit until you make the famous turn. So it's right on Hereford, left on Boylston. Hereford is like a super, super tiny little stretch, like one little block, and it has like a tiny, tiny hill. Some people say it bothers them. I personally did not notice it. And then you make your final stretch on Boylston. There are so many crowds. It's about 600 meters, I believe, and you'll be able to see the finish line the minute that you turn onto the street. Crossing this finish was one of the coolest moments of my life, and I'm so excited for others to experience that. And really quick, just in terms of pacing, obviously the fact that there are so many hills makes it super difficult. You can see here the elevation gains, like they're so hilly. I by no means paced this perfectly. I got sick at like mile 16, so I adjusted my pace. Not to say that I would have paced it perfectly had I not gotten sick. It's super challenging, but just for reference, here are the elevation changes. So I think really the best thing that you can do is use the downhills in the first half to your advantage without burning your legs out too much. Don't go too crazy. Make sure you conserve some energy for the second half of that race so you can finish strong on those downhills in the last few miles of the race.